Yeah, this one about as expected. Descendants 4: The Rise of Red, a sequel nobody asked for. I'm already not the biggest fan of the first three. I mean, they're perfectly harmless. Well, actually, I think the third one actually preaches some bad messages. But up until that point, the franchise was just another stupid Disney Channel series that kinda just disappeared. Like, they were pretty popular when they came out, but unlike something like the High School Musical movies, they haven't exactly had the best staying power. Doesn't help that the Disney Channel itself has kind of taken a nosedive, and it hasn't been popular pretty much since the second movie. I think after that, that entire channel just went downhill. Doesn't help with the rise of streaming TV and cable TV just kind of going out the window. The channel itself, much like the film franchise, has not exactly had the best staying power. But I will say, I did watch the movies when they came out, and the first one's bad, but it's perfectly harmless. The second one was an improvement, but I still wouldn't say it's good. It had a better villain, it had better songs, and I think the message was just a little bit stronger. But then the third one was a disaster from top to bottom. The songs were bad, the acting, it seemed like nobody was interested and nobody wanted to be there. The effects seemed to get worse, and the villain was just awful. So now we have a movie that's way too late and got zero hype when it was announced. And for good reason. This is pretty bad. Now, it already doesn't help that nobody wanted a Descendants 4 without the original cast, and they obviously couldn't do that because Cameron Boyce sadly passed away about a month before the third movie came out, I believe. And I saw a bunch of people saying that it gave a tribute to him in this movie, though I don't like what they did with it, because they actually did kill him off in universe as well. They had him die in between movies just like the actor did, which I'm okay with because honestly, I think had they had the character just not here, I think it would have been even more insulting. But what I don't like is that they use his death as a plot device. Like, the entire crux of this plot is that Uma, who is now the headmaster of Auradon Prep, wants to invite the Queen of Hearts' daughter Red from Wonderland, but the fairy godmother objects to this because Wonderland basically refused to join Auradon and has been closed off for 30 plus years, which, okay, not sure why. It's never really explained why. I mean, it kind of is, but we'll get to that. But she makes the argument that they should do it because it's what Carlos would have wanted. They literally use his death to make this shitty plot move forward. I don't particularly care for that. They should have just... They should have just left the tribute there and just stopped instead of trying to use him in order to move this shitty story forward. But moving on from that, nothing else in this movie really works either. The characters aren't as strong. What really annoyed me was the songs, because the first two at least had some pretty good songs, and the dancing was really what got those movies popular. And it helps that they were directed by Kenny Ortega, who directed not only the High School Musical films, but also directed Newsies, a movie I actually wasn't a big fan of, but it had a lot of pretty good songs, except for one, and the dancing was incredibly impressive. And even in the third movie, where pretty much nothing worked, at least a couple of the songs were decent, and the dance sequences were usually entertaining to watch. Here, there's hardly any dancing to be found here, really. It's really weird, and the songs are terrible. It doesn't help that pretty much everybody is auto-tuned to hell and back, not even just to the point of Emma Watson and Beauty and the Beast, where they're trying to fix notes, because I'm pretty sure most of these people can sing. But it's the, like, electronic type of auto-tuning. I know that doesn't make sense, but when you hear it, you know what I mean. Where it blatantly sounds like it's from a studio, and the auto-tuning has been amped up so high that it doesn't sound natural anymore. Like, it doesn't, even though the lip-syncing isn't off, I still don't believe for 1 second that they're actually singing in this movie, and it's blatantly obvious that it's coming from a studio. It's very distracting, especially in a Disney film, where the music's supposed to be part of the world of Disney, and when it's coming out of a studio, it becomes incredibly distracting. Now, I'm not saying I want them to sing live Les Mis, styles, especially if you can have them dance. You can't really do that much, although they don't really have them dance that much anyway, so I don't know what the point was. But when you're making it so obvious that it's coming out of a studio, it takes me out of the picture. Not to mention, there's some really stupid moments during these song sequences, like when Red's trashing her mother's kingdom, she's like vandalizing everything, and the guards are supposed to be chasing her. Instead of that, they're just dancing around like a bunch of idiots. Why? I don't know. And then, what sets off the time travel plot is the Queen of Hearts starts taking over Auradon, and then Red and Cinderella's daughter, I don't know what her name is, go back in time. And by the way, I already mentioned this, but yeah, I don't understand the choice of bringing Brandy and the other dude back for this, especially since we already saw Cinderella's son, Chad, in the original movies, who is a white blonde guy, and is never mentioned in this movie. And plus, their daughter has blue hair for some reason. Chad did not. So this decision was just dumb as hell. And this barely feels like it's connected to the other movies anyway. Other than Uma showing up and giving a really bad auto-tuned R&B rendition of What's My Name from the second movie, nothing really connects it to the other films. You could have made this a reboot and just cut out China Anne McClain and nothing really changes. So, back to the song sequences, there are several portions where these actors are rapping in the middle of songs, and their rapping is about as bad as Dove Cameron's was in the second movie. It's pretty awful. Cinderella's daughter is not as badass as this movie wants you to think she is. They want her to be the big, strong, independent female lead in this, and she's not as badass as the writers think it is. And not to mention, I already mentioned this when this movie was announced, why is Red's rivalry with Cinderella and not Alice? I really don't understand. I know they want to, like, tie other villains and other characters together, like in the third movie, for some reason, Amal's father was Hades. Really, he and Maleficent were married at some point. That doesn't really make any sense, but honestly, nothing in these movies ever made sense. And back to the Brandy casting, this is not the first time this movie franchise pulled this, so if you think this is, like, something new that this franchise also succumbed to woke garbage, as if it hadn't already, no, because they did the same thing in the goddamn first movie, where they had Cameron Boyce, who's about as white as you can get, as Cruella de Vil's son, and Cruella was black. That makes even less sense than this one. Actually, if you want to pay attention to continuity, this one is way more egregious, but I digress. Time travel nonsense is not... It's the same basic shit you see in every other film, because Red gets to meet her mother, who is an incredibly nice, sweet person when she was a kid, and Cinderella gets to meet her mother and see her shitty life. It follows the same basic beats over and over again. And then we see young versions of the villains, which is one of the cringiest fucking things I've ever seen put on a goddamn television. It's pretty awful. And of course there's some forced bullshit conflict between the two leads that lasts all of 3 minutes. No, literally, they have some big argument and they get pissed at each other, then 3 minutes later, they're friends again. Because of course. And then, here's the weirdest thing, is the ending. Now, the Mad Hatter makes a big deal about how when you mess with time, there's always consequences. The same thing you hear in every time travel plot. Avengers Endgame, Back to the Future, even the fucking Flash movie, the Flash TV show, you get the point. So, they go back in time and change all of this stuff. So much has changed in the past. And, okay, so, the ending is incredibly rushed. When they steal Merlin's cookbook, which is basically what the villains were trying to steal to pull off the prank on Red, which basically sent her down the path of being a tyrannical dictator. Yes, really, her being a dictator was started by one simple prank in high school. Because of course it was. But either way, they steal the cookbook, and you'd think this is starting to go into the final act, where all the time travel shenanigans finally start to come back to haunt them. That's what usually happens. The last 30 minutes or so is them finding out the consequences of them trying to fix it, maybe making everything worse, or having to deal with what's already happened. There's 5 minutes left in the movie. Once they get their hands on the book, there's maybe 5 minutes left. Because I looked, I'm like, okay, there's probably like half an hour left of this movie, because we're probably starting to go into the third act, and there was like 5 minutes left. And that stunned me. And then They go back to the future, and everything's perfect. Like, the Queen of Hearts is about as good of a ruler as all the good guys are, and there's a big, sappy musical sequence at the end, just like there is in all of these. But then what pissed me off, I'm like, okay, so they basically threw the time travel consequences out the window. Then we get a ending monologue talking about how when you mess with time, there are consequences, like we already heard. So basically, they're saving the time travel consequences for a potential sequel. Really? You do this whole stupid time travel plot, and you can't even have them deal with the consequences in this movie? This movie sucks. This isn't the worst time travel movie I've ever seen. It's still not, still don't think it's quite as bad as The Flash. But it's awful. Descendants: The Rise of Red gets an F, and I don't want to see a fifth one. So that's all I got, and I will see y'all next time. Bye.